He's a living Savior. Live and act as though he's dead. He's not dead.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the first episode, the inaugural episode. Is that what we call it? The inaugural episode?
For sure.
Of the Appalachian Disciples.
Yeah.
I'm Tommy. I'm the one with the accent.
Yeah. No, I'm Cody.
Yeah. It's been kind of I don't want to say a long time coming, but we talked about this for quite a while, that this is something we've been wanting to do.
Yeah.
And now we're here doing it.
I feel like we've got some wisdom to share.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be a good show. The first this episode and the next one are basically going to be about kind of getting to know your host a little bit, like our background, our testimonies, and what we've come from, things that we've gone through to get us to where we are right now. Because you grow through what you go through.
Absolutely.
So, you have any words before we drop the green flag?
No, man, I'm ready to get this thing started.
So
lots of planning gone into it, so I'm excited.
And I pulled the short straw, so I guess I'm going, right?
Yeah, you get first.
Is that how we're doing? All
Yep.
right, cool. Like I said, I'm the one with the accent. So I was not born in West Virginia. Shocking.
Yeah, shocker.
Yeah, we don't have pepperoni rolls out there. We never had them until I moved out here. But I was born in Sacramento, 1981. A legend was born that day. Wow. And then I don't remember a whole lot because then we moved to Oklahoma, and I started going to it was like, do you remember when you were in like Sunday school and you're like coloring, like Noah's Ark?
Oh, yeah.
The color books.
Yeah.
That was like the extent of what I got. It was like a small Baptist church in Oklahoma.
Right.
And I remember coloring giraffes and everything, and half naked Adam and Eve and all that stuff.
With the little fig leaf and stuff.
Yeah.
No, I got you.
And we playing Red Rover, and that was the extent. So I didn't have a whole lot, but my mom she was always the one that wanted us to go to church. Mm-hmm. My dad, not so much. He was against it. It was just kind of like there was no effort there.
Right.
I guess, it was like that for quite a while in Oklahoma. Then we moved to Sacramento, and we didn't go to church at all, ever there. And then I guess you would say you'd fast forward to maybe, how old was I? Let's go 10 or 11. We moved up to a town called Colfax, and we lived with my aunt, and my first taste of church there was a Catholic church. And it was nothing against the Catholic Church. I just felt like I didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
It was ritualistic, very, I wasn't like uncomfortable. I just wasn't getting anything from it.
Do you think that was kind of a cultural difference too? Like you were talking about how in Oklahoma you were at a Baptist church, right? And then you go to California, it was Catholic. Was that more acceptable?
Like, was Catholicism acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, was that just more common? Because, in the Appalachian region, here in West Virginia, there's quite a few Catholic churches, but if you number them side by side with, like, Baptist denominations, there's far more Baptists than what there is Catholics.
There's a lot of Catholic churches in California. I don't know. From what I remember in Oklahoma, there wasn't a whole lot. Mm-hmm. But I just know, like, it just wasn't, and we only went there a few times. But I always thought like church was someplace you go to learn, and like I said, it was nothing against it. It's just kind of like it just was not for me.
Right.
And there were some actual other churches that I went to before, like just, non-denominations. I'm like, this is not for me. I never went to like a Pentecostal or anything like that. I think honestly, in California, there's not a whole lot of Pentecostal churches.
Really?
Yeah.
That really surprises me.
Yeah. And from what I heard, there's a lot out here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really big. In the Appalachian region, man, like you're talking about Baptists and Pentecostals. I mean, of course, there's some other stuff thrown in there, but overwhelming, the Pentecostal and Baptist is what you're going to find.
Right. So then we moved to a small town called Alta, and this is kind of where the journey begins. And there was a really small town. If you're listening to this and you're in West Virginia, it's smaller than Raynell. It is a tiny little town. There's a little market, a place where you pay your electrical bills, and a church and a fire department. That's it.
Wow.
And an elementary school.
Yeah.
And so that church was where I first started getting, I think I was about 13-ish. And basically, I got hooked up with like a youth group. Mm-hmm. And what's crazy is this kind of ties into a little bit what we're doing here is you will always remember the person who, like your youth pastor. My youth pastor's name was Joel Harmon. And I just remember there was times during that time when I was new and he would spot me and he'd just be like, hey, come hang out with me. And we played volleyball and stuff. And then there was times too where my dad during that time, he was drinking. And he would just say, hey, come hang out with me. We're going to go cut wood. And I would just go out to his property. I hated it.
Yeah.
Because it was hot, but he was like a big brother to me.
Right.
And that was something I needed. And that kind of got me on fire for God.
So, I mean, just hearing what you've already said, you talked about Joel and like cutting wood. Like that's not exactly what you think of when you think of somebody like being influential in your life, right? Like I can think of multiple times where I've been cutting wood with people. I'm like, I don't ever want to see this person again because this is hard work.
Right.
But you're over here like this was foundational for me.
And it is, and can I still talk to him?
Right.
The dude's a grandpa now. It's just crazy how these little relationships that you get in life literally could sprout into something big. And I'll get into that later.
Okay.
And so I was like on fire. We used to do these things all the time called the Super Bowl. It wasn't I don't even know if it was on the Super Bowl. I don't know why they called it that, but we would get in like a church van, and then we would like multiple churches around the area would drive to like a bowling alley and then a skating rink. And at the very end, we would all meet up like in this one gym, and it's like a pep rally at a high school. And it was crazy. It was fun.
That's wild.
And that's when I learned my first Chinese fire drill. Do you know what that is?
I don't. A Chinese fire drill?
Okay.
Sounds like something you can't say on this podcast.
Oh, no, you can't. I don't know why they call it that.
Yeah.
But basically, you get to a stop sign, and everyone in the van gets out and has to run around the car one time and get back in. So I'm like, and here's the reason why I remember this. I'm like, oh, this is going to be so cool. Everyone jumps out. I'm the last one, right? Everyone runs to the right. I run to the left. And I go head first into this kid named Dustin. And I just fall to the ground. I'm on the front. I'm like, dude, I will always remember that. I'm like, great. This is awesome. But I got to teach my daughter that, by the way. She's almost 18 now, just doing that in the middle of Beckley.
Right. I'm just saying, like, where's the traffic? Like, you're also talking about California. I've been to California once, and I'm just saying, I know it's a different part. I was in Southern California, but still, like, I'm just picturing, like, all these kids getting out of this van, and, like, traffic is going crazy.
That's the thing. The more traffic, the merrier.
Oh.
Because you get people honking at you, and
Gotcha.
then you get in there and you just laugh. But now in my elder years, I'd be, like, wanting to, like, road rage.
Like, yeah, for sure.
Like, what are you idiot kids doing?
Well, also today, if I see a bunch of kids hopping out of a van and like running around in circles, I'm probably going to start calling the police.
Yeah, you're like, what are they running from?
Yeah.
And why are they running around it? Why are they getting back in? Who's threatening you?
They got out like, the world is scary, get back in.
But, it was during that time, we started like doing like these videos of like these, not testimony videos, but like devotional videos type thing. But there was this artist, a lot of people who are my age and older will know this person. You might too. There was a Christian music artist named Carmen.
I love Carmen.
Dude, Carmen, rest his soul.
Absolutely.
Dude, that guy
He was ahead of his time.
Amazing. I'm not going to lie. I still bump his stuff.
Absolutely.
Champion, great God.
Great God.
Dude, we got
Dude.
this America again. Let's go.
That used to get me so hyped. I could run through a wall when I heard Great God.
And we would do these discipleship or devotions on it, and then I got to see him live.
Really? I'm so jealous.
It was the coolest thing, and that's kind of when we go in these stages in our life where we're on fire. Like, I'm talking, you're buying every book, you're just wanting to soak it in, and then all of a sudden it just plateaus and you're done. That was high school.
Right.
So we moved down from Alta. I still kept in contact with some people, but then high school hit. And that's where, actually, let me go back a little bit. out of elementary school, we moved to a town called Applegate, and I ended up going to a Christian junior high elementary. It was cush. It was cool. It was small. Everyone knew everybody. It was awesome. I was nervous about going to high school because I guess you would say I was a little introverted then. And I've always heard bad things about high school. And so I asked my mom, because I had a buddy who was able to extend his high school years in that school. They just had to keep paying. I believe she gave me the option to do that, but she really wanted me to go to high school. And that's kind of, what's cool about that is fast forward to us moving here. I gave my daughter that option, and she chose to go to high school because she wanted to be a light in the dark.
So was it a private school
Yeah.
that you were at? Okay, so that's why you were paying. I got
Yeah.
you. So you went completely, you left at the end of middle school and went high school, totally new thing, like culture shock?
Yeah, it was. I had hardly any friends. I had a few friends from Alta that would hang out with me, but then I met new friends, and they weren't bad people. I've never been into the drinking drug thing. That was never my thing. I was a band geek, all that stuff, but there was something missing. One of them was Catholic, and that's fine. He actually went to that same church. I didn't know him then. The other two, I guess you would say atheists. They didn't believe in really anything. But, they were good guys. They didn't get in trouble. So I'm like, this is the best I'm going to get. So I'm going to hang out with these guys. Dated a girl in high school. She was a Christian. But it wasn't, we never went to church. She lived far away. It was weird. So I wasn't practicing. But again, there was always something missing.
Right.
And
even that word that you just said, like practicing, that's such like a triggering word for a lot of Christians, right?
yeah.
Because practicing can almost mean multiple things, like actually doing or almost in a way just kind of going through the motions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like almost
like
ritualistic.
phoning it in.
Right, right. So when you say that you weren't practicing, were you saying like almost you were stagnant in a way?
Oh,
like you weren't
absolutely.
like a non-believer. It's not like you felt like you just weren't growing.
I wasn't growing. I wasn't going to church. Wasn't when you looked at me, you didn't see someone who was following Christ. You're seeing someone who was following the ways of the world. But I would say, oh, I'm a Christian.
Right.
And I was like,
Because you're not going to say the opposite, right?
right,
Like you're just not going to be saved anymore.
right.
Right.
And high school for me, this is funny because these were the years where I could have gone, like literally if you looked at a road and you could have gone left or right, it was, and everyone says like, oh, high school, those were the greatest years of your life. They were horrible for
Yeah.
me. I hated every minute of it. And I look back now, I'm like, okay, I'm glad I walked through that fire because I learned a lot about who I was, what to do, what not to do. And then we were still living in Applegate and all this stuff. Then we moved to Sacramento, and eventually I kind of met my wife. It's kind of funny how I met her. During that time, my mom was wanting to go to a small church there by herself, and my sister was going there with her. My dad was not. And I went to a party with those friends from high school, and it's funny because like my wife, if I could go back in time and just be a fly in the wall to see how this happened, I was such an idiot. Like she's sitting on the couch and looking kind of uncomfortable. She's at a party, I think she was 18. And I was 23-ish or something like that. She looked uncomfortable, like she didn't want to be there, and she's super cute. And I'm like, hey girl, like I was like walking up trying to like, what's the word? Riz. And she's just like, I was in this, by the way, during that time I was in a band, non-Christian band, but we wanted to call ourselves a Christian band because we didn't cuss.
Because
Right.
that's the standard.
Right. Exactly. And I'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
Apparently that's the standard. But I was just talking to her and I was, inviting her to one of my shows, and she ended up coming to the show. And I'm like, this girl's awesome, and then I met her dad. And I'm like, and her dad is like the coolest guy. He's like super friendly, like, hey, how's it going, man? Hi, you know. And then I'm like, oh, I am in, dude. I am in. And mind you, I'm still in this way of the world thinking. But my girlfriend, then, or the girl, now wife, you know, she, you know, true love waits. You know, she had all this stuff
Right.
going on, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, yeah, right. You know, and I'm sitting there, and you know, she's like, you're her. My dad's not who you have to worry about. It's my mom. I'm like, man, that'll be easy, bro. Her mom grilled me. Are you a Christian? Yeah, total Christian. But I'm like, what am I supposed to say?
Starts giving you like a pop quiz.
Yeah, like yeah, oh yeah. Who are the sons of Zebedee? Huh? I'm like, oh, you mean the sons of thunder? Yeah, no, I'm not. About
Right, right.
that. Yeah, we were talking about that before the show. It's kind of funny. That was the original name of the podcast, folks.
Yeah.
But we were sitting there, and it ended up being great. And this is kind of where we mold into a different transition in me. So at our church right now, we're talking about a chair 1, which is basically like a baby, right?
Right.
You have and then you meet Christ, like you, you know, you get saved. Then you go to a chair, that's chair 2, then, which is basically like a baby. And then 3 is like, just, I guess you would say like an adult. And then the 4 would be like an elder,
Right.
Like the disciple. If you're at a 4, your disciples are making disciples, right? So, you know, I started getting along great with her family, and I think her parents saw that there was a lot of that me and my wife, now wife, are basically, we're going to get married. And then he wanted me to, one, get baptized, which was cool because he baptized me, and he wanted to disciple me. And I'm sitting there, what does that mean? What is that? And then he's just like, basically, we're just going to go through some stuff together. We're going to walk through life, and we're going to, you know, hit these books. You know, I'm going to help you along the way. I'm like,
Gonna
all right.
listen to Carmen.
Oh, see, they knew about karma, but we didn't listen to karma. I think we were more into the whole Petra thing.
Who?
Oh man,
I've never heard of Petra.
Petra's like the Christian Journey, or the Christian Def Leppard.
The Christian Journey.
Yeah,
This is something you're gonna have to show me after the show.
yeah, Def Leppard. Maybe we can make it our new theme song. You know,
Pour the Spirit on me.
nice, in the name of love. But their drummer has 2 arms.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but
Low blow.
Yeah, too soon.
If that's too soon, then I don't know when it would be.
I think it was like in the 80s.
Yeah.
But it was great. Now, I want to preface this because I think it's important when we're doing research, when we're talking about discipleship and we're talking about getting into the Word, we're talking about literally getting into the Word, not opening up Purpose-Driven Life.
Right. Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that book because men are fallible. So like since then, like almost everybody that I used to like has had some sort of thing happen. You know, Rick Warren, whoever wrote Blue Like Jazz.
Right.
All those people, you know, people make mistakes.
Absolutely.
We even have like, you know, awesome pastors like Tony Evans. Like just because they did something now doesn't mean everything they did in the past is written off.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, you think about the Gospels, man. Like that is the story of the Gospels is redemption, but it doesn't mean just because they started to write Scripture, you know, that everything was automatically perfect and sunshines and rainbows, man. Like,
Right.
They still had lots of trials. They still had a past. You know, that's the whole purpose of the Gospels, right? Redemption.
Right. And, you know, there's guys that can, like you said, like completely bounce back from it. So we went to the Purpose-Driven Life, and honestly, I don't remember a lot about that book, but I remember it was amazing. And then we went through some scriptures, and you asked me before, like my favorite verse, and during that time, I'm going to pull it up right here. This is in the ESV version, and it's James 2:18, which is funny because we've been harping on this at church.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that when I was reading it, that and my middle name is James, and that's one reason why I picked the book. My father-in-law asked me, "What book do you want to read in the Bible?" And I go, "I want to read James because it's my middle name." And he goes, "Okay, try to find like your life verse in that book. So it was, this is the ESV version. It says, but someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. And during that time, it just sounded like awesome. Okay.
Right.
It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me until I moved out here. So remember this verse.
Okay.
And then about February, it was actually maybe a couple weeks before mine and my wife's 1 year dating anniversary. My father-in-law and I went out to paintball, and we were shooting each other all day. And I remember talking to, because her brother was my best man. I remember he went and got the ring for me. And I'm like, I'm going to ask. And so on the way home, because I remember he wanted to disciple me and baptize me, because he wanted his daughter to be with a man of God. And now as a father, I'm like, I get it. Because my daughter is literally like 2 years away from the age my wife was when she met me.
Wow.
Those are things
That'll put things in perspective, huh?
Those are the things I think about. And the last thing I want my daughter to meet is a guy that was like me during that time. So I want her to meet, not to boast or anything, someone who's like me now.
Right.
Someone more grounded. No one's gonna be perfect.
I mean, in fairness, I know that we're talking about your daughter and everything, but look how you turned out, though. Like here you are. Like that might be, and I don't have children, but just from the outside looking in, like don't also discredit what the Lord can do.
Right.
In that process, because sometimes it does take somebody who is going to call you out on your knuckleheadedness and bring you forward. So, I mean, I'm not saying for her to, walk down and just pick somebody off of the sidewalk. But
Right. There are no sidewalks in Beckley, so we're good there.
You're right.
But, and then I remember going through all that and then shooting him with paint and everything. And I remember exactly where we were. We were in my Ford Ranger. He was right next to me. I'm in front of the Sunrise Mall in Citrus Heights, California at a stoplight. And I go, look over to him and I go, hey, Tim. And then he just kind of like looks at me and he goes, you're not asking me now, are you? And I'm like, no, not at all. I'm forget about it.
No, it's not it.
No, not at all.
I don't know what you're thinking about. I was just going to ask you to dinner, man. Like, where do you want to go eat after
Exactly.
this?
Well, because later that night, during that time, I was in a Christian metal band. And we had a show that night. And they all knew I was going to ask. So I'm sitting there driving home. I'm like, man, I just did all this stuff. All this, 40 days. Was it 40 Days of Purpose or Purpose Driven Life? Is it the same thing?
I think it's the same thing.
I think of a Purpose Driven Life 40. Whatever. I did all that. I mean, in my mind, during that moment, I was like, I got baptized for nothing. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And then I go to the show, and all my guys are like, hey, what do you say? What do you say? What do you say? I'm like, he said, you're not asking me now, are you? And they're like, what?
Not exactly the response you were hoping for.
Dude, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I'm like, how am I supposed to play a show now? I was crushed. And during that time, that Christian metal band, we had like a following of youths. So during that time, there was a lot of, I don't know if it's still a thing, but cutting. Kids would cut themselves. And not like they're trying to kill themselves. It was like a form of like, a way to like, I guess, express their...
Like feel
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
I mean, the few people I've ran into in my life, they've always told me that was a way to like feel something because they felt like numb.
And that was like kind of my first outreach was that. And I'm like, man, I have a heart for these kids who look at me like I'm a rock star. I wasn't. I still went to, a 40-hour-a-week job, but they looked at us because we're on stage. We're playing with these really big Christian bands, quote unquote Christian bands, and some bands that actually were Christian. But to them during that time, I was seeing both sides of people who were playing the part, people who were walking the part. And so like when you're a Christian band, I'm not going to drop any names, but when you're a Christian band and you're labeled as a Christian band, but after the show, you're out back hitting on what appears to be underage girls and smoking weed. I'm seeing that, and that I'm like, man, the world doesn't see this, and this is kind of bad. So it kind of made it seem like I have a microscope on me, and I didn't like that, and I don't want to be that. So eventually I get a phone call that night from my father-in-law. I'm like, oh, what's this about? And then he says, I hear my mother-in-law in the background, like kind of yelling at him, honey, he was asking for our daughter's hand in marriage, like that. And he's like, I'm totally sorry. Of course you can. Of course you can. I'm like, yes, score, like that.
You actually didn't even have to ask. Like, it was an attempt to ask, and then he called you and was like, yes.
Yeah, I was like, he's like, Tim, I've been like discipled. What do you think? And then that's when he cut me off. So I'm like, escape that one.
There you go.
And then it was like, I believe it was like a few weeks later is when I asked Steph to marry me. And that was all great. And then during that time, I was still in my Christian metal band. Steph went on tour with me a few times, which was cool. But I wanted to settle down and not be away from home so much. And we didn't have a daughter then. And I just kind of like I don't know, we played this one show in Quincy, California called Joshua Fest. I mean, Skillet, Barlow Girl, Super Chick, I think Hawk Nelson, all these big Christian bands were playing that festival, and we're playing this festival too, but we're playing a completely different stage. We're like the main side stage next to a bathroom. And I was like, part of me was like, this is my last show. And to this day, I kind of look back and regret it because I kind of just quit. I didn't seek Steph's advice on it, on whether I should do it or not. And even if she said like, no, I don't think you should do it, maybe there was a better way I could do it. Because we were at our peak, and I kind of just like left the guys high and dry. But I was still, during that time, I also tried out for a worship band. And that's fun. I was playing on an electric drum set. And funny, being a metal drummer, playing worship songs, I could not turn that off. I've since been able to ring
Dial
it back.
it down.
Oh, yeah. I was doing some drum fills with some double bass that I probably should not have done. And I got some looks back from some of the older people. It was a Baptist church,
Yeah.
so they're looking back like,
You just made him feel something, man.
yeah.
Like that's all it was.
I wanted to add like an 808, like a boom, like sound effects and whatnot. And that was fun, but it did leave like a little bit of a bad taste because we that church split. Church splits are always weird.
Yeah.
They're awkward because it's kind of like, my parents weren't divorced, but it's kind of like, what parent do you go with?
Right. So in my experience from talking with Christians too, like people that have been Christians for the majority of their life, even if it's not for the majority, but like a long time, have gone through some type of a church split. That's part of my testimony too. We'll talk about in the next episode is a church split. So I just think that's so common. Like most people have gone through one especially when you start talking about people that's been there for a while.
Right. It's an odd feeling, but we went, and it was a church plant. So it was, I'm not sure if you've been part of a church plant. It is a lot different than just going to another church. You're tearing down, setting up every Sunday. You can't leave your stuff there. It was hard, but I felt like because I was on the worship team there, and I felt like I wanted more. I wanted a connection with people. So I was always reaching out. I'm like, hey, let's go to a Oakland A's game. And I would never get a text back. And all of a sudden I'd be like, hey, can you drum Sunday? I kind of felt like I was being used, and that left a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
And that's, it's all about community and fellowship and stuff. And I wasn't getting any of that. And so we eventually, we went to another church, and this church was called Bridgeway. And Pastor Lance, that guy, he's like a historian. It's amazing because he'll be like, okay, we're going to read Revelation. And we did a sermon on Revelation. I think it took a year. And that's probably one of the hardest books to read because
Definitely.
And he didn't say this is what this means. He would say, this is what I think it means, but here's some other options, just to give it in perspective. And it was like a history lesson, and I was glued, and I wanted more. So I'm feeling my Christian walk grow. I'm like, yes, I'm needing this. I'm needing this and needing this. We have our daughter, which anybody will tell you, seeing someone get born, We just watched our birth video the other night with our daughter. I cried again, dude. It's still the most amazing thing. I was like, this little baby, that little baby in that video, that's my almost 18-year-old right here. And my daughter asked me the other day, she goes, what version of me do you like the best?
Oh, wow. That's a deep question.
I'm like, well, if I could have 18 of you right now, there's good qualities in every single one, and I'm like, I wish I could have 18 of you. Each one is a different beast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's crazy. And, so I think this is kind of where everything starts to kind of, I guess you would say, plateau in my life. So during that time, my main focus was, after our daughter was born, was I want to get in law enforcement. And I kept failing. I don't want to say I kept failing. I wasn't chosen.
Right.
Wasn't chosen. And I just kept going for it. And during this time, we moved back in with my in-laws because I was for sure, like, I was like, oh man, I've never been arrested, never done drugs. I'm going to for sure get in. And we moved back in with my in-laws, and we were there for like 5 or 6 years. And then I'm like, I felt defeated, less of a man. I mean, I can be honest, it's kind of, our job is to raise our family. And when you're living under someone else's roof, it makes you feel less than.
Yeah, I can see that.
This is not what I signed up for.
Right.
When I asked her dad if I could marry her, it was like, I'm going to provide for her. And I feel like I failed. And then eventually, I was able to get to a point to where we could move out because I got a job in law enforcement. Yay. After 15 tries, I made it. So we moved into an apartment, and I worked there for 3 months. And that's when all my anxiety and panic attacks hit. I would be up there in Lake Tahoe in a hotel room by myself. I wouldn't seek God for anything. I was like, what can I do right now to better, like, to get this over with?
Right.
And, I would call friends, and, I never self-medicate or anything, but I was on like anxiety meds. Right. And panic attacks are the worst. And I was like, man, during that time of life, I felt like a complete failure because I had to go home, and eventually they let me go. I wasn't blacklisted, but they just said like, hey, work on yourself. You could come back. It took me a long time to figure out that is what I wanted. That's not what God wanted. So like at 15 tries, I mean, this probably isn't what happened, but what it felt like was God's like, okay, fine. You could have it.
Right.
You could do it. But this is what I was protecting you from. This is why certain people's dreams aren't meant to be that. That's your dream. My dream for you is something else. And I got in my own way, and it kind of hit. I'm like, okay, I get it. So that put me on medicine. And then I was, still not going to church. Got a different job doing that. And then I get a phone call. It was like December, I want to say 14th. And it was from my mom saying that my dad, they think he had a heart attack and he's in the hospital. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, he's had a heart attack before and quadruple bypass. And so they were like, and my dad's like my best friend. And so she's like, and mind you, I'm not going to church during this time. So I'm still a believer, but I'm like, during this time, I'm like thinking, because you know how you get where you're like, I'm a believer, but in this moment, I don't really believe a whole lot of anything because I'm mad. And that's how I felt. I was angry, which you're allowed to be. You're 100% allowed to be angry. It's part of grief. And then I go, okay, so Dad had a heart attack, and she goes, you should probably come out here. So luckily, my really close family friends of ours, they bought me a plane ticket and flew from Sacramento to Oklahoma. And dude, there's nothing like flying, not knowing what's going to happen, being by yourself in an airplane, landing at LAX, you've been to LA, but being amongst all that, right. And then going there knowing that your dad's probably not going to make it. I'm like, dude, this sucks. Wasn't leaning on God. And I get there, and it was amazing because it kind of like brought me back to where I needed to be, because because I didn't realize a lot of these words in like a hospital, but it was like palliative care. I'm like, ooh, what's that? Is that like a ICU? And they're all, that's basically hospice.
Right.
And I didn't know that. And then when they told us that, you know, they're going to take my dad off of, because he didn't want any sort of life support, and dialysis was that was keeping him alive. And I knew that this was it. Then they brought in, I think it's like the chaplain there or whatever, and he was reading Psalms 23. And this whole time, my dad probably knew I was there by my voice, but I never had any interaction with him. And my sister, I remember her reading Psalm 23, the whole thing. And they've already given my dad, like, I think it was called the last rites or whatever. They put like a pin on his pillow, because he was in the VA. And they, when she read the end of Psalm 23, which is, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, my dad said it. He like mumbled it. And I was like, what? And that, for some reason in that moment, that brought me back down to, like, get out of your own way. Like This was like kind of like God stepping back in, like, you know, I was like, oh man. And going back, you know, cause I skipped over this part, when we lived in Sacramento, my mom was going to church. My dad, eventually started going. And then it was just kind of crazy because he, this guy who, great guy, you know, but never went to church. All of a sudden, you know, singing in church, just a completely renewed guy. And I'm like, man, that's amazing. And I'm looking at it from the lens of, did this happen because he saw his kids going to church? Because my sister was going there. I'm married to Steph. You know, I started going to church. I was playing on the worship team. And this is a big part of why I think discipleship is important, because I'm like, you're seeing fruit in other people's lives, and you're like, I want some of that. I want that. And I saw that in him, and it was amazing. And when they moved back to Oklahoma, because California prices are crazy.
Amen to that.
And, you know, he was like loving church. Like, he would never miss it. You know, it was like a completely new guy. And so I see all that. And then when God takes him away, you ask those questions. You know, everyone asks, why does bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. And
why does, you know, in this world that I've always known that had my dad in it, now doesn't, it feels like the world should just stop spinning. It's a weird feeling. And I was like, and that time I was still on medication from working at the jail. And I was mad. And I'm like, I'm just going to stop taking it. And we know it's the worst thing to do.
You really shouldn't do that with mental health meds.
And I felt myself just spin out of control. And then one day, my wife and I were driving in Folsom, and we see a church sign for Jesus Culture. Well, let's try this church out. And Jesus Culture, you know, like every church has its, I guess, controversies or whatever. But that besides, you know, we got there. It was a church plant. It was in a high school at the time. Very welcoming, and it was very the music was awesome. Some of the songs we play at our church right now are Jesus Culture songs. So we started going. It was the first church that we tried, and the church we stayed at. And then my wife, which is funny because a lot of this, it's amazing how much our wives get us out of our, I guess you'd say, our comfort zone.
Yeah.
We're like naturally, I don't know, guys, we're horrible at planning stuff.
100%.
And it's always the wives saying, hey, you know, you should go hang out with whoever. I'm like, why are you trying to get me out of the house?
Yeah.
You know, who's coming over? Who is he? You know, stuff like that. But like Jesus Culture, my wife, she automatically jumped in to serving with the youth. And I jumped into security team because that's what I was good at. Honestly, security team, you could probably witness to someone if they wander onto the campus and they're not supposed to be there, but that hardly ever happens. But every time
Here, let me take you to this room out back.
Yeah.
And I'm going to witness to you,
Yeah.
but you're not going inside the sanctuary.
I'm like spraying with pepper spray.
Yeah.
It was like blessing them.
Like, you think this burns?
Yeah. This is what it feels like when you're in hell, but worse and eternally. But we're every time we walk by the youth area, they were having so much fun. I'm like, man, kids are cool because they're quirky, and I'm a big kid, so I'm like, maybe I'll try that. So I did the whole live scan thing and that's essentially what opened up my love for serving. Was I saw these kids who were literally me, going back to my old youth pastor Joel, who saw me in the corner, not knowing anything or not caring about anything. He saw me being uncomfortable, and he came over and he was uncomfortable with me.
Kind of like a full circle moment.
It was, and I've told him this. I said, dude, this is crazy how like it like that little moment again sprouted this big thing, and I'm like, it's crazy, and you know it got me. I mean, kids are funny because you'll get some kid in the corner and you're like, hey man, what do you like? Nothing. Oh, really? I'm like, yeah, sucks to like nothing. You like music? No. Well, do you like noise? Do you like air? You gotta like something. And then he's like, no, I don't like anything. And I'm like, man, I was playing Fortnite the other night, and then all of a sudden he's like, you play Fortnite? I'm like, yeah. And then you build that connection, and then you just start talking to him. Now I am now the Joel, you know, my youth pastor Joel, and that's kind of like what we're talking about at our church right now with stepping into the next chair. Is I look back at that, I'm like, I stepped into it. I've graduated. I'm like, it was that moment. And I loved every minute of it. And this is when it started getting harder for me. Was we back up a little bit? Sorry, I keep getting ahead. But when I left my Christian band, I joined another band afterwards that was not Christian. I wasn't going to church, but I'm a Christian, right? So I'm thinking, hey, I could be the Christian witness in these guys' lives right now and help them. So we're in LA, Hollywood, touring and everything. And this one guy is off out, you know, cheating on his wife. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I want nothing to do with this. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I was in no place to be witnessing someone. I'm like, man, I am dead right now. I am like in a place to where I need to be fed. It's like going to a gas station. You know, your car's not going to go very far, you know, if you don't put gas in it. And I wasn't going to church. So we had to make a decision. Well, I don't want to say we had to make a decision, but my wife and I were talking, and one day she's like, well, we were like on a wedding anniversary, just really cute area in California. And we just got to talking about buying a house. And again, California prices. And, you know, we were in the process of buying a house. I'm not going to lie, it would have been a money pit. Like, if we would have put more money into it, like, if we moved there, we would had to have like 3 jobs each. It's crazy. And so we backed out. And then one day, Steph goes, what about West Virginia? And then I'm like, where? Well, I don't even know where this
like
is.
Like most people, what?
Yeah.
Like Richmond, right? Like you want to go near Richmond?
Yeah. I'm like, Western Virginia,
yeah.
You know, which is apparently a huge no-no to say around
here. Yeah, absolutely not.
And so I'm like, we've never even been over there. And we prayed about it. And I'm like, well, I wonder if I get a job transfer. And mind you, during this time, I am going to church. My faith is like up there. I'm doing great. And then, basically they said, because we're going to choose Morgantown because that's the bigger city, and I'm used to a bigger city. I mean, Morgantown, bigger city. You know what I'm saying?
In West Virginia, Morgantown, Charleston.
Yeah.
Kinda Huntington, if you really want to, but
I wouldn't want to go there.
No. That's not even, my faith isn't strong enough.
Yeah, no one's is. Sorry, Huntington. We'll be praying for you.
Much love.
Yeah. And so, the thrusting herd. And so we basically the picture she showed me of West Virginia was of the New River Gorge Bridge. I'm like, it's beautiful. I'm like, but I still don't know where it is. And then so Morgantown didn't work out, but Beckley did. And well, it's the southern half. I'm like, never even heard of Beckley. So I contacted through my work out here, and they're all, yeah, we could get you out here, but you'll have a driving job. You'll have to change positions at work. And I'm like, man, okay, if that's what it takes, well, will you guys, and this is during COVID too. And that right there was also a heartbreak for me with church, because as a youth leader, we went to Zoom calls, and you would, at the beginning, it was cool. Like all these kids are on their computer, which was horrible because everyone's like sitting there doing their Fortnite dancing and like, like we were talking about recording earlier, when you get like 5 people, it is chaos. I had to mute everybody. We've all been on Teams calls. It's annoying.
yeah.
John, could you please mute?
Yeah.
You hear a kid crying in the background. But I was like, it was disheartening because slowly but slowly those squares got smaller, fewer and fewer kids. And I was mad. I was like, dude, especially in California, because I'm like, we're so overdoing this. And I'm not saying COVID wasn't a thing, but I feel like, man, and we had a youth conference planned that weekend that everything went locked down. We had everything set up on stage. We had artists, like musical artists, like locked in to play. People from Florida were coming to this thing. They were in travel all the way there, had to turn around. And it was so disheartening, but I still had to have faith. So when my boss said, yeah, we could go to Beckley, we're like, okay. So we found a house. It's the house I'm in now. And we started buying it without ever seeing it. This is all a faith thing. This is where I'm tested. So
I mean, like you saw pictures though, right?
we saw pictures. He walked around with a FaceTime or whatever. And then he also, which is funny because there was like he was walking down into our basement, and all of a sudden there was like some wasps that started attacking him. I'm like, what are we getting? What's going on out there? I mean, I don't know, there's like cicadas and stuff around here. Are we walking in
Like taking it as a sign.
Yeah, I'm like, we shouldn't do this. But I'm like, I feel like this is where we're supposed to be. So we're like, okay, we're going to do it. So we start buying the house, and the drive out here was horrible. Absolutely horrible. Our moving company, showed up 4 hours late. We were supposed to stop in Bakersfield. I think you didn't go through Bakersfield, but it was the desert, in between Vegas and LA. And then we were going to cross over into Arizona, but they were 4 hours late. We get to our first hotel. It was practically a brothel. And we're super tired. We're angry because our moving company. Then California's on fire at the same time. We cross over to Arizona. We see a black cloud. I'm like, man, this is a sign we're leaving this place. Cross over to Arizona. Everything's open. No masks. Everything's fine. Starting to get hope. Then we're driving. And we keep going. For the most part, everything's okay. Me and Steph were using walkie-talkies. But we were arguing over walkie-talkies, which is funny because I'm like, I told you to go right. Over. And then we get to Nashville, and dude, Nashville, awesome city, but man, it was pouring rain. I got lost. She didn't. She gets to the hotel. We get to the hotel. It's like a rap concert happening there downstairs. It's like a nightclub. And
what website did you use to? I mean, if you're in the middle of a brothel and now a rap concert, I mean, hotels.com, brother.
I think I just found the cheapest because the move was costing us $5 grand.
I mean, we're talking about a move of faith, so it didn't matter where you were going to be, you were safe, right?
Right.
So.
And all I knew is during one of those nights we're staying with my mom, right? And so that was the only good day. I mean, it was so sweet. We showed up around, I think, midnight, going down her road. She's outside with her little dog, and she has stew ready for us. And she's basically, we ate real quick and went right to bed. And it was kind of sad because I was only able to be there for that day because we got to get the robe. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, there's this faith thing. I just feel because at this time our house hasn't closed yet. Mm-hmm. Anything can happen. And you and everybody else here in West Virginia talks about this. The second you drive through that tunnel and you see that sign, there's something really welcoming about seeing that West Virginia welcome sign that I'm like, man. And we came in during a rainstorm. Obviously, it always rains here. Mm-hmm. And we came here during a rainstorm, and we're like, this feels good. But we didn't know how big the mountains were here. You and I had that conversation about Vegas. You're all, look at these mountains. Well, brother, sad.
Well, I mean, you got to realize that, I've been in West Virginia. That's the first time I'd ever been out west.
Yeah.
So, being able to see a different type of mountain was really cool.
Yeah.
Or a hill rather than a mountain.
With no trees.
Right.
Cactus
Cacti. Everywhere. Yeah.
And then we moved out here, and then granted we don't know anybody out here. No friends, no nothing. And I said to my wife, before all this, when we told our youth leaders that we're leaving, kind of sprung at them, felt kind of bad. We were all having it was a youth leader party at their house, and we were talking upstairs, and we told them our plan. And basically you know, they were not mad at all, but they basically prayed over us and commissioned us, which is kind of what we're supposed to do.
Right.
And kind of what this podcast
That's
is about.
kind of what it's all about. The commission.
And like they basically, and we look back and like, they literally were sending us out, and we had that faith. We did it. We come out here, get to our house. Very first Sunday, we go to our church that we're at right now. And during that time, we had the bracelets of red, green, and yellow, I think.
Oh, I totally remember that.
Like
you can give me a hug,
high five, and
high
stay
five,
away.
or wave at me at a distance with your mask on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe most people had like little greens on or whatever. And we sat in the back right, just kind of casually walked in, and music was great. That's back when we had Travis as our worship pastor.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, and I started crying. I'm like, we were missing this in California, because California was still completely locked down. And I'm like, this is great. This is what we need to be. And, you know, I emailed Pastor Q, who is what is he? He's
our campus pastor.
Campus pastor.
Yeah.
I almost said principal. I guess that's the same thing.
I mean, he's also the principal of the school.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have been wrong.
Yeah. And I emailed him before we moved out, asking about like youth stuff. And youth wasn't happening then because of COVID. And then it was about almost like a year later, I finally introduced myself to him. He was like, that was you? I'm like, yeah. But then I started getting involved in serving, because I wanted to serve in and out of the church. Mm-hmm. And I started serving outside the church. Now, mind you, coming from California, there's also a change of heart, because in California, I'm not going to lie, dude, homeless people bug the heck out of me.
Right.
I mean, I pay good money for my apartment. Don't walk near my apartment. And they made their bed. And it's so funny, because our pastor was just talking about this on Sunday. Mm-hmm. Well, they made their bed. They could sleep in it. You know, like, why should I have to give up my time? That was my attitude. And my wife, again, she started serving before me at a food truck. And she goes, you should try it. Well, I don't really want to. I don't want to. And then slowly she started introducing me to people, you know, softball people. So I started meeting people, and because us guys, we don't make our own plans. We're horrible at it. And so I started meeting people, and I started serving on the food truck. And then my heart started changing. I literally felt it soften to these people, where literally it's one of my favorite days of the week.
Yeah. So, too, when we're talking about these food trucks, you know, these are almost like a mobile soup kitchen type of thing, you know, and it's actually gone through some changes with the church. Like, it started out as just handing out meals, and it's really transitioned into trying to build communities where these people can reach out to for prayer if they need something. It's really taken on a totally different face than what it started as. You know, it's not just like here's a grilled cheese and a bowl of chili and there. And now we're like, hey, is there any way I can pray for you? What's going on? Let's talk for a little bit. Let's sit down and have a conversation.
And we give them resources too.
Right.
Like, people want to, I mean, West Virginia gets a very bad rap of being like the opioid capital of the world. Some of these people could very well be me and had a broken arm, and then you get a doctor prescribing you whatever, and now you're hooked on it, and to no fault of their own. And now they're
right.
And we read about it before we moved here, and then I saw it firsthand, and my heart breaks. Not sitting here saying everyone has that same story, because there's some people there that they would rather live like that. But it's,
so what was your perspective with that? If you read about it and stuff, before you came here, did you have do you almost think that the perspective that you were getting was a God perspective, or was it a perspective from the enemy that was trying to keep you from coming to West Virginia?
It wasn't trying to keep me from coming here. It was, I guess it was one of those, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows when you got there.
Right.
You think you're escaping this, but that's, people say all the time, well, there's homeless here too. I'm like, dude, there's homeless everywhere. There's drug problems everywhere, but it's not for me to judge. It's for me to love and essentially plant that seed in them. And hopefully they, I may never see the fruit of that. 99% of the time, I will never see the fruit of these people, because they may go somewhere else or whatever. But I don't need to see that. That's not for me. And at first it was like, man, I would trust me. I'm a human. I would love to see it. I would love to see the guy, beat addiction and then come up to me, hey, remember me? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a win. But that's not a win for me. That's a win for the kingdom. And I'm like, man, like I need to keep that perspective. And, and then I started serving inside, doing the cameras, which is fun. Just because it has something to do with tech. It's kind of neat, and honestly, it's an important part of the ministry because some people just don't go to church or if they're out of town or ambulatory. And then we also do it for prison ministry. Mm-hmm. Now that was another thing for me. When I originally worked for the corrections, my mind was, I'm going to like help change people's lives. As a corrections officer, that's not your job.
Right.
I went into it with the wrong mindset. I needed to catch these guys before they committed the crime, not while they're there.
So just kind of pushing a little bit more on that. You've gone through several different places in your walk where you're at. So if you went back to the corrections officer thing now, where you're at with your walk, do you think you'd have a different perspective?
That's a good question. I'd have a different perspective because, you know me, I'm naturally kind to everybody. I'm not going to lie and say there's a fear there that my anxiety would come back, because it wasn't just such an anxiety of being away from my family. It was you're locked in with them and there's no way out, and I did not like that feeling. So I don't think I would go back into that. And again, I think I want to be obedient because God was protecting me from that. I'm like, okay, well, where do you want me? If my life, if God's saying, Tommy, your life is slinging pizzas, but that's just what you do to make money, but your purpose is doing this food truck, and then, even doing this podcast, making friends, discipling people, that's your purpose. This is just your job, but your purpose is this.
Man, that's good. Sometimes those two things always get intertwined with each other. I think that's such a worldly mentality. Sometimes your job is actually not your purpose. That's good.
And I was caught up because I used to work for an armored truck company too. I was caught up in the social activity of it all, where, when you're working for that, you're now the center of attention. Everyone wants to know, oh, what's that like? Like, what's it like to hold all that money? And now you're talking about your job, and I'm not gonna lie, I loved it, because I wasn't that one lonely kid in the corner anymore. But now I'm just like, I'm slinging pizzas, whatever. It's literally just my job. I don't care. It's not glorious, but it allowed me to move out of California to here to be able to do what I love, which is serve. My favorite day of the week is Tuesday, when I get to serve on the food truck, get to hang out with you guys. We have our Bob group, which is our Band of Brothers group that we meet up once a month. And even with that, like, that is not just once a month for a lot of us. It's, we hang out, outside of that, which is what we're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So kind of to wrap it up a little bit, like I've seen the growth that happened from me just kind of coloring a coloring book, and, going through these ups and downs of, mental health, trying to do it on my own, which is cool now because I don't have to be on any medication. Granted, I still struggle with some anxiety, but I have an outlet now. I pray about it, which is something that it's very basic. Mm-hmm. And it's also the last thing you want to hear your wife say. Well, have you prayed about it?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I have. You get all angry. But going back to like the verse I had, it was, we've been talking about spiritual fruit connected to the vine. And I realized, the past couple of years, I'm like, man, I am connected right now. And the last thing I want to do is like lead someone down a wrong path. And then, so going back to James 2:18, it says, but someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, well, so I love doing food truck. That's a work. I love serving on, the camera team. That's a work. God's like, cool, that's awesome, but where's your faith? And then I go back to my move out here, where I literally trusted God. I'm like, you know what? We're homeless right now, technically speaking. My boss was going to put us in a hotel for 2 days or whatever, but we are like, God, please, like we want this to happen. And there was faith. And I was like, okay. And then it's not the way that I thought it would work out, because it's not what I want. And even going back to, you know, like I was saying, like when I was on the worship team back in the day, it left a bad taste in my mouth because I wanted relationship, and they were really not wanting to do that for some reason. I don't know. I'm not bitter anymore, but something was telling me out here to join the worship team. I'm like, I don't want to, you know, like I really don't want to.
Isn't that how all serve teams work out, though? You're like the ones that you definitely don't want to be on, and you're like dead set, and then all of a sudden the associate pastor is calling you up and like, hey, do you care to lead this team for me? And I'm like, I was actually going to talk to you about stepping down from that team.
Right. And it's funny because when that happened, I'm like, fine, I guess I'll do it. And I did it. And that put me through like a mental anguish to do it. And then God said, okay, now quit. I'm like, what? Why am I went through all that. And it was a test. It was like, you know, you need to be obedient. Like you did what I said. And then those things, like, that was my faith. I was reading something the other day, and it was basically, you know, what is it? John 15, 8 or 7 through 8. It says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. And we really need to abide in him, stay connected to him, because and things aren't going to pan out the way you want them to. They'll pan out good, but better. It's weird.
Right.
It's very strange. And
I think that's because we try to get our mentality from, you know, the American way of thinking. You know, like, if I just work hard, it will work out. Well, that's not always true. You know, and even like you said, even if it does, what'd you miss out on?
right.
You know, because you're actually not connected to the source.
Right.
You know, like if you're just, I'm going to do this on Cody's own power, you still might have a decent outcome, you know, like, because hard work will pay off in some aspect. But on the flip side of things, is like, what'd you miss out on? Like,
Right.
if you were disconnected, what could have been the outcome? How much better could it have been?
And I mean, like it's funny how sometimes, like, you go to like a church service and it seems like they're talking to you. And this is just this past Sunday. Then this is, you know, John 13, 34, 35. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. And that's been on my mind too, because of like the food truck, because food truck isn't just for people who are down on their luck. I have people there that work, you know, that just come there because they like the food. They like the way that I cook, Cody. Imagine that.
That's it. You're really good with the spices.
Yeah, you know, the salt and pepper, a little bit of, you know.
I mean, that is an important distinction with this ministry that we're referring to, is that it's not just for, you know, low income socioeconomic type stuff. It really is for anybody. And we do have all walks of life that come to these food trucks.
Because the food is part of it.
Right.
The main part of it is the prayer, the connection, the fellowship with the people. Nothing makes me happier when I'm on the food truck and my wife is like, say she's sick, or she's at her own Arise group, which is kind of like our Bob group that night. And I'll have someone peek their head in the truck. Hey, is Stephanie here today? Oh, she's not. She's making connections, and that's awesome. But it's also important because I'm tying this into like basically what my testimony led to, and this is like the hard part of discipleship. This is I don't know where this is. I cut it off because I took a screenshot. But it says, no discipline seems enjoyable at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it yields a harvest of righteousness and peace to those who have been trained by it. And I look at that and I'm like, man, I have so many trials that I went through that I'm like, man, why am I going through this? And I'm like, man, it literally built me up. It made me stronger for who I am now, so I can bear all these other trials that are coming at me. Because, man, we both know, like, I'm a firm believer that when things are hitting you hard, like when you feel like you're starting to feel attacked, that's probably when you're doing good. Because if you're like just kind of like going through the flow, Satan's got you right where he wants you.
Right, exactly.
And then, so he wants to stop you. And, you know, that's kind of like basically what this podcast is about. You and I have, I think I remember when you and I first met, we briefly talked. I forgot.
I mean, do you remember when we first met?
I do.
It was, we were moving a safe.
Oh, dude. That thing was
And
heavy.
we had no idea, but I'm telling you, nothing will bring two brothers together than moving a heavy piece of furniture up a flight of stairs.
It was a gun safe for some reason, but
Yeah,
there's no guns
it's
in
for
it,
the
but-
school. They were using it to protect files. It was like a fireproof safe they had to have for their accreditation, and we needed it up 2 flights of stairs.
Dude, it was literally a whole Bob group there. And I remember what you said to me, because I think we had a brief interaction before that, and we were talking about NASCAR.
Yeah.
And then I wore that day a NASCAR T-shirt, and your word to me, you go, wow, you really do like NASCAR.
Well, I mean, it's pretty evident. You know.
And so, and then like with that, you know, all these, you know, friendships and stuff. And me and my wife, dude, we talk about all the time. I'm like amazed at like how well things have gone out here. We've had a few struggles. We've had this, you know, life's not going to be great. But I'm like, man, I am so blessed to be here, because I'm like, I truly feel like God called me out here, and I would have never seen it. I would have never seen any of this happen if you would have told Tommy, who just married Stephanie, hey, in this many years, you're going to be living in West Virginia, working a job slinging pizzas. You're going to be happy.
And doing a podcast.
And doing a podcast.
To talk about discipleship
Yeah.
in Appalachia.
Yeah. Which, just to let you know, in California, it's Appalachia. And I'm like, dude, saying that now is wrong.
Just to let you know, in California, they're wrong.
If I hear someone say Appalachia, I'm like, I cringe now.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I'm like, it's not Appalachia.
So you've made your full transition.
That transition's happened.
Wow.
But
Which is pretty cool, though. That's why I'm really excited about the shows, because you're going to get 2 different perspectives. Like, you're going to have, I've always lived in West Virginia. I've traveled a lot and got to see a lot of different perspectives, but, you know, this is home, and a lot of the values and things that we're going to talk about this region and how they tie into Christianity, but totally different perspective. Somebody that's coming here and experiencing it for the first time as an adult, you know, I don't know anything different. So
Right.
I get to hear like a different perspective, how you came from probably the polar opposite of West Virginia. I can't really think of a state that could be more polar opposite, and not like, it's just a totally different culture. It's not like talking bad or anything about California. It's just a different way of life than I am used to.
growing up in California, when I was talking about Alta and Applegate, it was their smaller towns like where we live here. They're mountain towns. But when I lived in Sacramento, that like I was just outside Sacramento, so the St. Albans to Charleston, I guess you would say. But it was still busy. So like even when I traveled to Cincinnati or Charlotte or Columbus, that's the big city. But I've always kind of basically lived in a small town my whole life. Now my wife, she's been there in that area, the big city. So I love the slower life, and maybe that was what God was telling me to do. He was trying to slow me down, because as you saw when you went, it is very go go go. I mean, if you look at New York, everyone's walking really quick to their next place. You can't even own a car there because just traffic sucks. And here it's kind of like, in life we need to slow it down.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, even the little bit of time I was able to spend out there, like, it was hard for me to put aside time to read my Bible, because I honestly felt like I had to plan so far ahead to get just a few miles down the road, and we were on vacation, but I literally felt like I could not plan in God time that day, and that's weird, because out here, I mean, everybody has busy days. I mean, regardless of where you're going to live, but out there, I really felt the pressure. Like, I need to leave 2 hours ahead of time to be able to get where I'm going.
Yeah, it's crazy, and like even with our Bible, our yearly Bible plan that we're doing, like you and I both said, like, man, we felt like we're just essentially just checking off boxes. Yeah, we read it, but did we hear it? And like this new one, it's very short, and I'm like, man, that was good. I want to listen to it again. And it was funny because the one this morning, sometimes when you're because I listen to it on the YouVersion app, sometimes it'll automatically start like another one. You'll hear you like that. I'm like, what happened? Did my phone like glitch? And then I go back and play it again. It's glitching, and then it hasn't. But then I just realized, oh no, I needed to hear this like 4 times. I'm like, okay, that's the sauce right there. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, that's what I wanted to hear. And that's what I want to encourage everybody here that's listening is, you know, there's nothing wrong with going outside and reading other books. I mean, Cody and I are right now, we're reading another book by John Bevere right now. That's all great. But man, the Bible, that's where you need to be. And study it. You're not going to read it one time and be like, all right, I read it. Man, I'm just going to tell you, like, I read it. This is like my 4th time through it. You're going to laugh at this. The 2nd time through it, I'm like, I felt like I was hearing the story of like David and Saul for the first time.
Really?
I'm like, how did I miss that?
Yeah.
That is a huge story.
So I actually have a very similar experience with that it's just really difficult sometimes to be able to take in information, even when it's, you know, in small bits. Like, you know, our plan that we're doing right now, it's much smaller pieces of scripture, so you can kind of chew on it a little bit, if you will, throughout the day. But I feel the same way. Sometimes I go back and I can listen or hear a Bible verse or a Bible story or whatever again, and be like, oh, how did I not pick up on that before?
Right. And well, that's, you and I have had that same conversation where we're like, man, how come when our pastor's preaching it, he's getting something more out of it than what I'm getting? Because he's studying it. Like, he's maybe even gone through a couple different versions of it and listening. Like that was the ESV, and I think I naturally listen to the NLT, but I think we teach out of the ESV. I can't remember.
Well, I mean, at our church, they go through different versions, because sometimes you can read something like, say, the ESV, and you go over to the CSB, and you're like, oh, okay, now I get what it was saying. You know, it just puts it in a little bit of perspective. You know, I think that's something that a lot of people get hung up on. You know, and especially in Appalachian, man, like, people are it's got to be King James Version, and you know, there's a new way of thinking with that, though. That like
LeBron James.
I know the LeBron James version.
He wrote his own book.
But no, honestly, that's starting to change, I think, and I just never really understood that perspective, because it's really just a different voice in a way saying the exact same thing. Like, you can say something and I'm like, I have no idea what you said, but my wife might say something just in a little bit different way. Like, oh, you know, that's what he meant by that.
Kind of like when you said, do I want a buggy to put my pepperoni rolls on? Oh gosh. Right?
Here we go. And here we thought that we were fully transitioned. This podcast is going to change the name. We're going to be the Appalachian Disciple and the other guy.
Do you want to pop? I'm like, are we fighting now? What's going on? No, you're right though. Like that's what's great about the YouVersion app. You know, it's always in my pocket. So if I need it, it's there. And also if I want to cross-reference different versions, it's a lot easier to have that than multiple versions of the Bible. It's like my daughter the other day, we were at Books A Million, which is like our Barnes & Noble folks. And she's like, oh, a dictionary. I should get one. I go, you have Google.
Why?
I don't know, because I don't.
Why do they even print dictionaries anymore?
I don't know. Do you remember the Encyclopedia Britannica?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not that much younger.
But I'm like, man, like.
Listen, I told my students today, not to like get off track. We were talking about like how to modify somebody's home, and I was like, "Are the phone jacks accessible?" And they're like, "What's a phone jack?" And I was like, "Are you? You're not actually asking me that, right?" They're like, no, why would you plug it into the wall like a regular outlet, right? And I'm like, dude, this is, I'm going to pray for y'all.
Well, that's the thing. Times have changed, right? So I really want to be in a better habit, and I have not been good at it with bringing my actual Bible to church. I'm the first one to say I am not good at memorizing scripture. I need to start doing that, because the only way to do it is by memorizing it. Not to promote I guess you'd say a secular movie, but there's a movie called The Book of Eli.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And he's blind, and there's no more Bibles. And he memorized the whole thing through Braille. and he's like basically kind of like the last living thing that could reprint the Bible essentially. And spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but it has Denzel in it, and he's amazing.
I watched that movie a long time ago, and I remember for some reason there being like a big push against that movie for some reason. Am I remembering that right? Like, was there a national push like Christians were like, don't watch it?
Well, it's probably like the whole Angels and Demons, Dan Brown thing of
probably.
Da Vinci Code, but it's a movie. It's not real. But this is what I encourage everyone like to have a paper Bible, because if your battery dies, you don't have access to it anymore. If for some reason World War III hits and a big EMP hits and you can't access it, you still have it. I do like the accessibility that I could just have stuff, but I also like to like highlight things. And I have my Bible, my dad's Bible in my car at all times. And it's kind of cool having his Bible because I get to see his notes. So it's also something cool you could pass down to your kids, even like this recording this testimony, like someone may not even care about it, right? Whatever, but someone might. And then maybe one of these days something happens to me. Well, there's record of it. My daughter now knows what I've gone through. And hopefully it inspires someone to know that, like, God is not a genie in a bottle where you're going to wish everything to be perfect. But he has a plan for you. He's always had a plan for you. And you're going to have to... He never promised you things are going to be easy.
Right, definitely.
And that's part of what makes us who we are.
I mean, if you really think about it, if his literal only son... didn't have an easy pass here on earth. Like, why in the world would we think that we do? If we're called to be like Jesus, what makes it think that we're not going to have any trials or tribulations to show how much we need to lean on God?
100%.
I mean,
I just think it's a cool walk. I love it. Looking, and I encourage people to write down their testimonies. This was kind of like a more descriptive version. My written down version was like a page. It was but like write it down. Like I started journaling this year. Write it down in a journal, and then make it a thing where January 1st you go back and look at your past year of what you've gone through, and you're gonna be like, oh, I totally forgot about that, and I prayed that it would go away, and it did, but not the way I thought it would. And I just think that's amazing how our Christian walk could just flourish.
So now that we've kind of walked through it and we're kind of in modern day, if you were to look back and say that's the moment, like I think that, as Christians go, that there's a moment in your life where you feel like there's no turning back now. Like this is my life commitment. Where do you feel like, because in a lot of walks, man, like it's a roller coaster. Right? Like you have days where you are just on fire wanting to go out and save the thousands, right? But then you also have days where you just barely can get out of bed. And you're like, God, I don't feel you. I don't know where you're at in the situation. But could you pinpoint something in your story that you're like, this is the moment where I'm not turning back. Like this is my life commitment.
I don't think it's not so much like about me, but when I was working with the youth at Jesus Culture, I feel like I had a responsibility for these kids. God trusts me to help these kids. And if I led them astray, if I was not 100% committed to helping these kids, then I was in trouble. Daddy was mad. Mm-hmm. Like you trusted me with these kids to mold them because he trusted Joel to mold me. I still talk to some of them, and it's crazy because I'm like, a lot of them are like graduated now, and that was the moment where I'm like, there's no turning back right now because I still look at Joel as my youth pastor, and I know that he wasn't led astray, and it's just crazy because I'm like, man, like you were given responsibility that was an honor. I'm blessed to have that honor because I was like, man, parents trust me with their kids. God trusts me with his kids. And I hope to God that like when these kids are older, that they'll remember some of the things that we talked about and everything. They don't need to remember my name. They just need to remember God and the stuff that I was praying over them for. That was the point of like no turning back. And I kind of get that now, but a more adult version with the food truck, because, you know, I do run into some of these people when I'm not at the food truck in normal day life. And am I the same guy there and here? Like, that's the thing. The world wants a Christian to mess up, and they could pinpoint, you know, oh, look at that guy. He's messing up. He's a Christian. But I'm like, man, I really need to be on my game.
No, actually, he's a Christian, but he's also a human.
Right.
Right. I think when people hear that, like, oh, he's a Christian, he messed up, you know, we're also humans. You know, literally there's a standard we can never meet. I've always found that just absolutely just mind-boggling. But, you know, there's also grace that people just don't know. But when you're on a walk with Jesus, people just don't understand. Like, you're trying your absolute best to be Christ-like. It doesn't mean that you are Christ. It doesn't mean that you are going to be perfect. That was a big realization for me, was just realizing that some of these people I looked at as spiritual fathers, like you were talking about earlier, you know, I've seen time and time again them fail. And early in my walk, I was like, man, that if they can't walk it, I'm not going to walk it. But man, I was missing the point. You know, it's all about that walk.
Well, I will always remember, like with my dad, when he stopped drinking. Like it was, he's one of the only guys I've ever known ever to just stop drinking cold turkey. And I just remember him walking in the living room and he was bawling, he was crying. And I remember like he knew he was like, he needed help and he messed up. And it was like right there. I think it's important to see people, you know, fall off the horse and, you know, get back on it again, you know, not as far as drinking goes, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, literally, you know, pick themselves up, you know, because life, you know, will set us down, and then become a better person for it, and then a Christian person, and keeping the faith through the whole thing. I see it all the time with people, like, I won't say all the time, I don't work in the health field, but like, you know, stories of people who are dying from cancer. Mm-hmm. And I have a hard time with that. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, man, like, could I keep faith during that? Because I'm dying. I'd probably be upset. But at the same time, I see some people are just like, you know what, I'm ready to go. I'm like, man, like I want that, like that type of faith.
Yeah, where you can literally walk through hell and not get burned.
Right.
That type of faith, yeah.
Like a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah. And, you know, I think what's crazy is I used to think of like some of the spiritual fathers, which actually in my life was my grandma. You know, I saw her walk through so many sicknesses and health trials and stuff and live in constant pain, but never curse at, you know, the face of Jesus. Like, would just never, ever lose sight of her faith. I'm like, how? Like, I go stub my toe and I'm like, oh, better go get saved again, you know?
You turn into a different beast.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you've seen me like that, where I'm just like, you know, down, and, you know, it's tough. And I think it's also important for us to, you know, walk beside with each other through our struggles. And, you know, there's a time to like I can't remember an exact example, but like you gave me, you might even remember, I can't remember. I remember what it was. I had an issue, and then I was going to do something. Mm-hmm. And then you basically said, I understand where your feelings are right now. How about you do this instead? And it brought me back down to a different level where I was thinking straight, not thinking out of anger, thinking out of just the, you know, like what I should do as far as like stopping an issue. But basically, you need to do this because this is going to be ultimately better. And I believe this is going to keep you on the right path for what God wants. And it was. Because if I would have gone my other way, I'm like, oh my gosh, I would have ruined relationships with people, you know, and it's crazy. But that's why we got to keep. I think it said in this, you know, find a Paul and be a Paul.
Yeah.
And then mentorship is a basic biblical principle. So like, you know, and then
we've lost that though. You know, like, what we're taught today in the American church is, all right, you're saved, now your life's better. I mean, there's still liquor in that cabinet.
Or repeat after me this prayer.
Right. And that's not at all biblical. I mean, that's what this whole podcast is about is, the last commission was all about going and making disciples, we're taught all the time at our church. And that's one of the biggest reasons we wanted to do this podcast was this message needs to get out to a lot of people, we're not here to just make converts. And I mean, that's great if you can get somebody on board and they stay with it and they become a disciple. But if you're just saying, all right, let's repeat this prayer and then, all right, back to your normal weekly programming, that's not Christianity.
I look at church, back to a gas station reference, as like I need to go to church every Sunday that's for me. Like I go there, worship God, and that's where I learn more about, the word, from someone who's obviously more well-versed in it. And then I go out during the week. And then I come back. I'm like, okay, what else can I get? And I go out and church would not really be that cool if it was just within the walls, and, it's also like with your friends, like, when I'm just reading off of a devotional that I recently read, it says, when Moses' faith wavered, Aaron and Hur held up his arms. Like they literally held his arms up so he could still have the faith. Like they were holding his arms up. And that's why it's good to have good friends around you that and one of the,
that's such a good point. Good friends, and that doesn't mean cutting off all of your bad friends and
pray for them.
Right. Pray for them. It's not like, all right, I can't talk to you anymore because I'm a Christian, but it is so important to have people that will actually call you out on your bad attitude, on your bad habits, on your, wavering off of your walk with Christ. It's so important to have that. It might just be one person who you let have that access to your life, but we all need those people to actually bring the correction.
And that's it. Correction. It's not like, I could correct you for the same thing that you corrected me for last week. We're all, responsible. Like we all have little quirks and stuff. And you asked me earlier, like one of my favorite Bible verses, and James 2:18 is the one that I picked originally, but the one that like lately that I've like that scenario right there with, Aaron, holding up, the arms and everything, but it's again, I'm not versed on where it's at, but it's when the friends lowered the friends to the,
yeah.
Are you willing to literally do that for someone else? And I'm like, man, I think I am like I would, you have your, I call them like, like your early morning friends. Like if you called me, say you had an alcohol problem and it's midnight, I'm asleep because I wake up at work, and you call me and go, man, I am about ready to take a drink. I'm over here at, this place. I will be there in 5 minutes. That's who you want to surround yourself with. And not saying like you had to, like you said, alienate all your other friends, but you need to surround yourself with good people. And church is like, when I moved out here, I said church is going to be the place where I find my people. And so far, so good. And I'm like,
well, you got me out of it, so it's a good deal.
Yeah,
right.
Whatever. but it's like, I think it's super important to, because, iron sharpens iron. And, I know these are all like cliche things to hear, but man, sometimes it's the cliche things we need to hear to like, you know what, man, you're right.
Yeah, maybe you should slow down and listen to those cliche things.
Right.
Like it's not just another saying that, that's totally applicable to what
Right.
we're trying to do.
Right.
So like for our, our listeners here in our first episode, let's tie a bow on this episode. And what do you think is in your story, the one thing that you think the listeners should take home from your testimony that can help them with their walk?
Move out of California. No, no. Honestly, it's one, read your Bible. Like, honestly, study your Bible. You will find that you relate to more of the stories than you possibly think. I originally thought reading it was like Lord of the Rings. And I'm not a very big fan of Lord of the Rings or anything mystical. I always thought it was like that. But man, it's, you know, even like some of the parables in there, like I'm like, okay, I get it. And I mean, literally, you got to study it. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, man, life will not be easy. Don't lose faith in the hard things. That's where you need to have the most faith and lean on God. That will get you through everything.
But it starts with yes, right? Like you got to do
Absolutely.
your part. So yes, it's these big things, but you got to say, all right, yes, I'm going to move to West Virginia. I'm going to, you know, step out in this faith. It's all about your yes, man. Like God is a gentleman. He's not going to force himself on you. You have to be willing to say, all right, Lord, I'm submitting to you. Yes, I'll do what you want.
And obedience, man. Like
Yeah.
that's essentially what it is. It'll come down to it, and you'll know, and find those around you who will support you in that, because sometimes we're like, oh man, that's crazy. Well, is it? You know, I mean, I had some friends, you know, that were like, West Virginia, you're moving away all the way out there. I mean, it's the most, besides Mississippi, it's like the least, you know, rich state in America. I'm like, it's not why I'm going there. You know, I'm like, I feel like God prepared me to serve out here by having me serve there, because I wouldn't have done it otherwise. And that was like training wheels. And now he's like, okay, your training wheels are off. Now it's time you're stepping into the big leagues. I'm going to give you more responsibility with these people, you know, who need you more. And then I may not do this for another another month, and then he may say, you're going to do something else. You're going to clean bathrooms at church. Be like, okay. Like, it's not about glory. That's a transition for me that was hard. I told you about working for Loomis, and it was all about me being the center of attention, talking about the cool jobs. Now it's not about that for me with serving. You know, it's like, you know, I'll do whatever it takes. Like when I'm on the food truck and I'm leading, like I'm not just sitting there belting out orders. I'll wash dishes. I'll do whatever. I'll take the trash out. I'll do whatever. But I think it's important that people kind of, you know, submit to God and say yes, be obedient, and, you know, do it with a servant's heart, and not for like, definitely not like, I'm going to do all this so I get into heaven, but, you know, you're going to have faith and works. You're going to have both. But you're definitely going to, you know, the faith part, I think, is kind of more important right there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you.
So,
But it's so silly to try to separate those two. Like, if you have faith and you know Jesus, the works are natural.
Right.
Like, it's not like, all right, so now I'm saved, so I got to find a way to serve him. It'll come. And like I said earlier, it'll probably be the thing that you don't really want to. You know, and that's part of, you know, leading into our next episode here is, you know, the power of your yes, and just making sure that you are able to recognize it, even when it's not convenient. You know, because what's going to grow out of it is pretty amazing.
and 99% of the time, it's never convenient.
I would say 99.9.
Yeah, like food truck for me on Tuesdays, literally right after work. I had to move schedules. It's very inconvenient, but I made time.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy how that time shows up too. So, all right, man. Well, I think, you know, episode 2 is going to be great. We're going to dive into my testimony.
you think you could beat that?
I think so. Are we keeping score? Like mentioned faith, mentioned scripture. I don't know. You threw out some fire stuff, man.
Hopefully there's some good stuff in this.
So,
You can follow us on Facebook at the Appalachian Disciples, and you can also email us at the AppalachianDisciples@gmail.com. And make sure to find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, all that good stuff, and YouTube. And you know what? Give us a little bit of a, 4-star or 5-star rating? What is
yeah,
it?
just find us. Just
find us.
Just hit that follow button.
Yeah, leave us a good review. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Somewhere along the line, we've lost the meaning of discipleship.